Hey everyone, welcome back to week one of VSL Season 5. Luis Scott Vargas here with Brian Kelly, the reigning Vintage World Champion, and so far one of the tied for first in VSL. You and Eric Froelich both have a match win.
It's great to hear that. Hi, everybody. For those of you just tuning in, there were a few technical difficulties with the screen before, so if you see something that looks a little bit unfamiliar on camera, some things going on, we're just working through those. Athena's doing a great job. She's doing the best she can, and I can personally attest to the fact that she is very hardworking. When I needed a tutorial on how to get used to Google Hangouts and Skype, I reached my peak of technical knowledge in the year 2001. Since then, it's all been downhill. So she's been very helpful, and I definitely appreciate all the work that they've put into this. So thank you, everyone, for bearing with them.
Alrighty, so we have up next, I don't actually know. Kai and Steve Menendian here. So we're all expecting Steve to be on a blue deck, and not sure what Kai's on. Kai has a pretty wide range. He's played a lot of different stuff over the course of the last couple seasons.
They do, and I wouldn't put it past Steven to try something different. He's not exactly conservative, so he's not someone who finds his comfort zone and is afraid to venture out of it. I think
Steve's never not registered Force of Will, so I'd be surprised if he did not have Force of Wills in his deck, but
he's had several decks that don't have Force of Wills. Actually, he's built some really impressive and intriguing combo decks, some of which were glass cannons, but just the design and the mechanics that went to them were really something else. There was a deck called Rogue Hermit, which is...
I'm mostly speaking of VSL. I don't think he's registered a non-Force of Will deck in VSL yet. So
I'm speaking of the comprehensive, holistic...
the last 20 years of Stephen Menendian decks. Sure, I have a little less context there.
But you're absolutely right. We see in the VSL, it's been blue. There's a lot of gush. I understand that he's an author of a tome, a JMJ tome.
So the thing I like most about the fact that Steve wrote a book about gush is that we can say that he literally wrote the book about gush. I haven't read it, so I don't actually know what he talks about, but I imagine it's mostly about returning islands and drawing cards.
I'll plead the fifth on whether or not I've read it. But it's a great card, and I've seen many of his articles and writings about the many different dimensions of gush and things about it that are subtle. I mean, it seems so simple on the surface. It almost seems fair. Return 2 islands to your hand, draw 2 cards. It's just that it has secondary implications and tertiary implications that make it huge. Huge. It's a good card, and I think if you're going to write a book about an unrestricted card that's not Mayor of Avabruck, it might as well be gush.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. I don't know what Kai is playing again. Yeah, he has quite a range.
Yeah, Kai's played. I mean, he played Burning Oath last week, or sorry, Burning Omniscience with Oaths and all that last week. He's played various like workshop decks. He's played various blue decks too. So I mean, he's gonna try to metagame. Like one part of VSL, of course, is like knowing your next 3 opponents. Kind of like what do you put them on?
I didn't know what you would be playing. I was hoping you would play Landstill.
Oh, and yeah, I guess that's what I played last time.
I like playing Landstill because win or lose, there's always a lot of skill testing going on. It's always an engaging match, even though it would go on forever, you know. And tonight might not be the best night for an hour and 45-minute long match with slams and crucibles and standstills. But when you played a Young Pyromancer, I was like, oh crap. I mean, I don't want to curse on air or use a swear word, but I was thinking like this.
Yeah, when I probed and saw your hand, I thought I was like in pretty good shape. But then when you played Tendrils, that kind of unraveled a little bit. Since at that point I knew I was dead because you next turn had the will to kill me, and then I knew you had Force of Will. So assuming you had a blue card, which of course you ended up having, that was actually I had an out. Since you were at 9 and I had 9 power, the way I could kill you through Force of Will is if I drew a Lightning Bolt. I could ultimate Dak, Lightning Bolt your Dark Confidant, take control of it even if you countered the Lightning Bolt and attacked for 9. But that wasn't unfortunately what happened.
Right. Yeah, I'm glad I left the Dark Confidant untapped. I didn't expect another Sulfur Elemental, and I think I might have died if I had been more aggressive.
Yeah, you took 5 damage or 6 damage off 3 Dark Confidant flips, which is actually slightly above average. So I guess I needed you to flip another force. Though on the last time, I don't know if you play Treasure Cruise or Dig Through Time in your deck, but
No.
okay, I was hoping you had an 8 in your deck. That's why I didn't attack you at all.
That's one of the concessions I make for playing Dark Confidant, and I actually like that because when you add black, it's almost like you have direct substitutes for Treasure Cruise and Dig Through Time. You have Yawgmoth's Will instead of Treasure Cruise, which relies on the graveyard, and usually will net you more than +3 card advantage. I mean, even on a bad day, it's like bring back a land, probe you. I'll do that. I mean, I'll cast a Will for value. Because I don't need to resolve Yawgmoth's Will to win. I can just use it as a black mana sorcery that nets 4 card advantage. That's fine. And then there's Demonic Tutor instead of Dig Through Time. A lot of times when I play Dig Through Time, I'm kind of using it as a quasi-Demonic Tutor. It's like, I want to find this. Here's Dig Through Time. There's a good chance that I'll find X or something that can get there. Demonic Tutor is more direct. And the other advantage is that Dig Through Time and Treasure Cruise are not early game friendly at all. By early game, I mean like turn 0, well, if you pitch in the Force Arrow, but turn 1, turn 2, you might be able, I mean, you can cast a Treasure Cruise on turn 1 in Vintage, but at the end of the day, like, you might as well just have had a different hand because you probably had to burn your Black Lotus, maybe a Lotus Petal. You know, you're not going to end up with a 9 or 10 card hand from casting Treasure Cruise on turn 1, unless you time Twister first. I mean, there are always a lot of exceptions in Vintage. But I like seeing a hand, and as good as Dig Through Time and Treasure Cruise are, there's a certain cumbersome nature to them that is still there. And when they were first spoiled, we were like, these might not be that good because you have to do so much work. We found out it was easier to get the work than it was. Than we had anticipated. But still, I feel liberated from not having the delve spells.
All right, that was a comprehensive explanation of your position.
I guess it was. It might have been long.
I was just gonna letting you roll with it. You know, there's no you can't stop a train in motion. So, good. I built a deck that I thought was going to be decent against Mentor, and because I put you on Mentor or Oath. Those are the 2 decks I thought you were the most likely to play. And I put Rich Shay on, because I'm playing you, Rich, and Randy. I put Rich on Mentor or White Eldrazi, and I put Randy on most likely White Eldrazi. So I actually think Sulfur Elemental is pretty good against that range. But and then I wanted a more aggressive build, which is why I ended up playing Delver of Secrets. So, but I got summarily crushed, and that is what happened.
It happens.
Oh, yeah.
It happens to me a lot, too. It's a zero-sum game. So, we have Kai Buddha and Steven.
Well, it looks like Kai did, in fact, run with the White Eldrazi deck here. We see... not knowing who's on the top or on the bottom, I assume Kai has to be on the bottom, because there's no way he registered Dark Rituals and Steve registered Eldrazi. Yeah, there we go. So we've got this is actually one of the better matchups for Eldrazi, which, you know, Eldrazi, it first broke on the scene, a couple weeks ago. Someone played it in one of the European tournaments, I believe, and it might just be the best deck in Vintage right now. I was trying to figure out how to attack it, and it looks really resilient.
It's a very good deck. It's a very strong deck. I didn't want Lodestone Golem to be restricted because my decks are always kind of designed to slither around it anyway. Like, you play Lodestone Golem, I play an Oath of Druids with 2 Mox, and like it leaves a lot of avenues of exchange open for me. And this is the nightmare scenario, that they're down to 1 Lodestone Golem, so they fill it with this stuff that is even more horrifying, like Thought-Knot Seer. I give the designers credit for filling a void. But I did actually suspect that their deck would get more ferocious after Lodestone Golem.
Well, also
restricted, and I think...
Yeah, I think one of the big things, too, is this deck now gets a way to play Eldrazi Displacer, which seems like a card that shores up a lot of what the Workshops deck lacked, which is just like an on-the-board way to interact.
Right. With something that comes into play via Tinker or Oath of Druids or Show and Tell.
Exactly.
And of course, the Containment Priest combo is ridiculous because you just exile a creature and can't come back.
I do
So
think I do think that the mana in this deck is not as good because it's now playing a two-color deck, right? Workshops used to be one color, which is colorless, and then now they're playing colorless cards and white cards. And we saw Rich unable to cast Containment Priest, and here Kai can't cast Thalia, though Kai's still doing fine. Double Thorn in play is really tough to deal with.
yeah, absolutely.
So Kai here can play a big endless one. He can play an endless one for 6 actually if he wants to. He looks like he might make the down payment on a Mox Jet though.
So what's going on is almost nothing. Kai is polluting the board with sphere effects, and Steven wants to chain cheap spells together, and he will be unable to do that.
Yeah, and Kai opted to play the Mimic first because that way next turn he can play Endless One for 7, still hit for 7 with the Mimic, or maybe more if he draws another land, and then hoped to put Steve on a 1-turn clock after that. Oh, wow. So Reality Smasher does a lot of damage too. So if Kai's going to win next turn, he can play either one. Regardless of which Eldrazi he plays this turn, he gets to attack for a bunch with the Mimic plus, in this case, Reality Smasher, and then next turn gets to play a big Endless One and finish things off. So unless Steve... No, even if Steve had a Hurkyl's Recall, Steve would be hard-pressed to get out of this.
Yeah, because he needs one more mana source, and he has a Vampire Tutor, but without any additional mana sources, he can only cast something that costs 1, and I don't think there's something to dig him out of this hole.
Yeah, even something like Black Lotus just doesn't do it. Black Lotus is a net +1 mana, but without already having like a Hurkyl's Recall and another mana source in hand, that's just not going to do it. The Dark Rituals break even. Steve does get to look at his deck before conceding, though, so he has that going for him.
That's always exciting.
Yeah, the Reality Smasher cut a turn off the clock here, because without Reality Smasher, Mimic hits for 7, Steve goes to 13, then next turn, Kai attacks for 9, and then maybe Steve has 1 additional turn, but as is, on the draw against Thorn, Storm decks have a lot of trouble.
Certainly. I don't think there are any outs in Steven's deck. I mean, I haven't seen the deck list, but I don't know of anything that costs 1 that can clear the board of Thorn. Yeah, he conceded. Now, I wonder if he has Oath of Druids in his sideboard. I see a Bayou there.
Yeah, the Bayou does lean towards that, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was just something like Xanadu Storm or City of Solitude. I think I actually see a City of Solitude. I see during their own turn. There's not very many old green cards that that you would play that could say that. So,
yeah, I mean, it certainly could be. I mean, of course, Abrupt Decay. So I've seen different things that Storm decks in Vintage have tried to do against shops in the sideboard, including playing Deathrite Shamans. And of course, Oath of Druids. So I wouldn't put it past him to have a transformational sideboard into Oath of Druids, but from what I can tell, it's not going to happen, which is a shame because Oath of Druids is really good in this matchup.
I can't imagine Steve was prepared for 0 white Eldrazi decks, though. That was just the obvious big deck coming into this week. And, you know, one of the things that makes the Eldrazi deck a lot tougher to fight is that it's no longer just all artifacts. You can't board in Hurkyl's Recall and you know, interact with Thalia, for example. So the fact that it's got a lot of creatures makes it, there aren't very many one-size-fits-all answers anymore.
Because the Blue Mages, we like to get a lot of card advantage from our removal. We like to play Pulverize, Massacre, Supreme Verdict, where like we destroy everything for 1 card. Because that's our strength, drawing cards. We want more resources. And having to 1-for-1 them when every time you're 1-for-1ing them, it may be costing 3 for a 1-mana spell. There's a good chance you don't have the mana available to do it, and there might be too much damage on the board for you to get out of that safely. I did put more Swords to Plowshares in my sideboard because of all of these creatures.
I went 1 above. I've got 4 swords and 2 Path to Exile. I just expected to play against a lot of Thought-Knot Seers, so
I have Ferocus too, because it's used in Vintage usually to bounce Griselbrand, but I think it's going to be necessary to bounce Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, that thing.
Yeah, I like Caracas too. I've got one of those hanging out. So, uh,
It fits in nicely because they like to destroy your mana base, and then white is your support color that deals with their threats. So the fact that you get an extra white mana is pretty helpful too. It's a shame you can't gush it. Maybe they can errata it. Caracas counts as an island.
yeah.
Speaking of Caracas, all right.
Well, Steve's got all the mana in the world and a Hurkyl's Recall, which, oh yeah, I mean, I would certainly just keep this as Storm, but this is the kind of hand that he's got, yeah, a couple draw steps where if he doesn't draw like a big spell, then he might not do anything. Oh, he just snapped off the mulligan. All right. I, I'm curious your thoughts on that first hand. It was all the big mana, like Lotus, Mana Vault. It had a Hurkyl's, but it had no card draw.
It's a very tough call. It's a gamble because it has enough mana to be functional when you know that your opponent is going to try to make you dysfunctional by constricting your mana base. But it has absolutely no business. So I've kept hands like that and seen them go either way. I want to say this is just based on intuition from a lot of anecdotes that more often than not, maybe slightly more often than not, they end up not getting there because you just don't draw anything. I remember I drew Yawgmoth's Will in a situation like that once, and all I did with it was replay the Hurkyl's Recall, and then I was in the same boat next turn. So it wasn't a terrible decision to mulligan that.
Yeah, I don't think it was. I certainly don't think it was a terrible decision to mulligan. My inclination is to keep just because you lose more hands constrained on mana than business.
Mm-hmm.
Though Thought-Knot Seer might change that equation. Thought-Knot Seer does well. That hand is actually not that vulnerable to Thought-Knot Seer. You don't have the business in your hand anyway to begin with. So if you get Thought-Knot Seer, then you're still fine. You just hope to top deck.
It would be great if he had drawn Mind's Desire then, because he had all the mana, Hurkyl's Recall.
Well, this Time Walk may yield something. I mean, Steve's just hoping for like Time Twister. That has to be his best draw here.
Oh, that's not too bad. Memory Jar.
Now he needs to wait, draw another mana source. But if he can, then yeah, Memory Jar is very good.
Mm-hmm.
Either Sworn Canonist is not the sideboard card I'm in love with out of Kai's deck here because it gets interacted with by cards like Hurkyl's Recall or Ancient Grudge or Shattering Spree. It's an artifact, so it's still vulnerable to a lot of the cards your opponents are frequently going to bring in against you.
It's you're right. In Hate Bear decks and shop decks, and this of course being a hybrid of both, it's relevant and good, but also very vulnerable. It is, I would say, really strong in a blue deck, though, when whatever they use to try to get rid of it, you just use one counter spell. And they can't fight over it, even if they boarded in missteps. And then if they have to tutor for their removal spell for the either Sworn Canonist, that just buys you another turn, and it wastes their tutor. And then you counter their removal.
Yeah, Kai thinking for a while here. I have a hard time seeing any play but go Caracas, Mox Ruby, Canonist. Because playing a 3/3 endless one seems like it sets you up to lose to like a Vampiric Tutor or Mystical Tutor in the turn.
Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely play the Canonist.
Since there really are only two plays here. It's Ayavugan, Mox Ruby, Endless One for 3, or I guess Ancient Tomb, Mox Ruby, Endless One for 3, and then Canonist off of. I guess maybe Kai's thinking whether he wants to play Cavern. He could use the Cavern to make his Canonist uncounterable.
That's true.
But it's not like these decks really run very many counters anyway.
Right. It's usually not a Force of Will. It would probably be a Mental Misstep, maybe a Pact of Negation, although that's really risky. All right, this is actually really good because, wow. You can Dark Ritual. The Memory Jar is an artifact. And then if he stacks it correctly, if Kai puts a bunch of crap on the table, I think he can be Hurkyl's and lose all of that inside of the jar, which is a spectacular play.
Yeah, and Canonist, of course, doesn't, like you said, it doesn't interact with Memory Jar. It doesn't stop. There's no prohibition from casting Memory Jar here because it's an artifact. Mm-hmm. And then next turn, Steve can go like Upkeep, for example, if he wants, or he can just wait to see what he draws for his turn, and then Hurkyl's Kai, and then crack Jar, and that's going to end up very good for Steve. Kai needs to draw Phyrexian Revoker quickly.
which will get Hercules, but then the Canonist, or rather, the Canonist might still be in his hand then. I don't remember exactly which way you have to stack it.
I guess Hercules will still not work, or Hercules makes Revoker not even a good play there.
This is going to be an exciting turn.
Well, Steve, I mean, Storm has to win these games. It has to win the game where it's getting 7 new cards with multiple mana already in play versus a board of nothing. If Steve can't win this turn, then he's going to be pretty hard pressed.
Right, I guess because goldfish. Yeah. He's going to be goldfishing. All right, so let's see.
Normally you'd want to do it on upkeep here, but it's a little awkward because you have to either tap your swamp and be out of black, or tap your Ancient Tomb and kind of waste the colorless. So yeah, that's a reason for Steve actually gets to do both. He can put Gitaxian Probe on the stack and then crack Jar. I actually like doing that. Oh, he's gonna Hercules first. I like putting Probe on the stack, then casting Hercules, then cracking Jar.
Yeah, I hope he remembered to hold down control.
He did not. And now he's pondering that fact, I think. Perhaps, we'll see.
Well.
Oh, he got there on the Gitaxian Probe.
If that had been stacked correctly.
Oh, right. Twitch, of course, chat points out there's a Canonist in play. You couldn't do both. Though I would have valued probably Hercules recalling for sure over the extra card off Probe. Though in this case, it looks like Steve's very close to just going off.
Yeah, let's see. We have Ancestral Ponder. I don't recognize that blue card in between Ponder and Dark Ritual.
It's Brainstorm, and yeah, I don't know why Steve is playing that particular art of it. So Steve doesn't have a guaranteed win here, but he does get to see 3 cards off Ancestral and then either 3 off Brainstorm or potentially 4 off Ponder.
Yeah.
With a ton of mana from Lion's Eye Diamond, double Dark Ritual. So yeah, again, Steve's in very good position here.
Agreed.
One advantage of Brainstorm, too, is if Steve goes like Ancestral first and then ends up not getting there, he can Brainstorm a good card to the top to set up next turn because he'll just discard Jar Hand here. But
yeah, I'm actually not sure how he should play this. I mean, I suspect that what you want to do at the end is Ancestral Recall and use the Lion's Eye Diamond in response. But I'm not sure.
Well, you see more cards with Ponder than Brainstorm, but Brainstorm can set it up. Well, if you want to set up Ancestral Response sack Diamond with Brainstorm, you need to play the Delta first and sacrifice it so you don't have to shuffle. Looks like that's what Steve is leaning towards here. This does get to see you less cards than going Brainstorm, Fetch, Ancestral, but it looks like Steve's just going to kick things off with a recall here. Oh, he did miss. So Steve actually could. So this is really interesting. What I'd be inclined to do here, I think, is Brainstorm with the Lotus Petal in response, sack Lion's Eye Diamond for blue. That way, if you draw Time Twister or Mind's Desire, you just go off, or any tutor. And if you miss, you can just put a good card back on top with Brainstorm and pass the turn and hope Kai doesn't have much of a follow-up. But you know Kai's going to have Canonist, so...
Yep.
Otherwise, you could also just Ponder because it sees more cards. Ponder and... I guess sack Lion's Eye Diamond. The problem is then if you were able to... I guess you've already used up Lotus Petal and Mox Sapphire and your land drop, so Ponder into Black Lotus to let you cast Brainstorm is pretty thin. Oh, and Mind's Desire is under the Jar, so that's not even one of your outs. You're really just looking for a Dark Petition or a Demonic Tutor. You just win.
Or Yawgmoth's Will itself.
Yeah, and any of the like good black cards.
It's probably in the tank. So would you Ponder Brainstorm? I guess the Ponder is better.
I think the Ponder is better. And I do think you sacrifice Lion's Eye Diamond here.
Yeah.
there's so few blue sources that you hit that I think I'd rather just yeah.
Because the brainstorm sets you up for next turn, but you know that next turn there's going to be a Canoness, and there could be something even more horrific.
And also, there's what card could he hit off brainstorm that you'd want next turn? Not now. He has 10 mana floating.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, there's a time twister, so
that's pretty good.
Looks like we're gonna get a new lease on life here. Does he have enough? He has 6, 8. So 8, 11, 12. 13. He has enough to Blightsteel. He's already played a land. Wow. So he's 8, 9, 10, 11, 14. He has exactly enough to Blightsteel Time Walk. but then Kai can chump it with the Endless one.
That's not how I expected this to end up. But that is something else. I guess you Cabal Ritual too.
Yeah, he has to use all his resources. Because he's used 1 to cast Mana Vault. So yeah, he gets to do it all though. And then Steve is left with 2 lands. Kai does not have a lot that's going to be able to stop a rampaging Blightsteel Colossus, since it's not legendary, so Karakas is not an out.
And he's going to untap with Probe and Mind's Desire in his hand? Yes?
He used the Probe, so just the Mind's Desire?
Just the Probe.
There we go. That was appropriately maniacal laughter for what just happened. All right, so Memory Jar clears things out. Steve could untap. I kind of like untapping Mana Vault here. And then set up a Mind's Desire in 2 turns. Not that it's really going to come down to that, but you might as well play for what happens if Blightsteel doesn't work.
I don't know.
What you can't do if you're Steve is go to 5. You don't want to lose to a Reality Smasher.
All he has to draw is right. Well, I think he definitely has to block.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that is not a choice. So. All right, so, well, Steve just giving up on the Mind's Desire plan completely.
Yeah, because there'll be an Ethersworn Canonist in play, so unless it keeps flipping artifacts. And I think we already have his best artifact in play. Although maybe he could get them. It would be really gratuitous.
Had Kai drawn Eldrazi Displacer, he might have been able to win that game. He could have played it for 1 mana off Karakas, had 3 mana up, and start displacing Blightsteel.
I wouldn't be surprised if he boarded out them.
Yeah, that's certainly a possibility, but it is funny that's just one of the cards in his deck that could happen.
Mm-hmm. And I think I probably would still board them out. I don't know if the fact that there's 1 Blightsteel Colossus would make me bring in Eldrazi Displacer, because I think if Blightsteel Colossus is already in play, your primary game plan on the play has already failed, so you've already lost the game anyway. There's no sense wasting resources to trying to salvage a win from a lost game. Oh, so Kai's hand would be really good with more mana, especially a Mox or a Mana Crypt.
Yeah, I don't think Kai can keep this. He just does nothing.
Because if it had 1 more land, that is just what we would call a parade of horribles.
So what is this hand? Oh, this hand's quite good. So Kai can play a turn 1 Spirit of the Labyrinth and a Chalice of the Void for 0, or he can play a Chalice of the Void for 1.
Tough call.
On the play against Storm, my inclination is to play a Chalice for 0, but I could see that going poorly.
you played for 0, there's theoretically the risk of Black Land, Dark Ritual, Dark Ritual, Dark Ritual, Cabal Ritual, Dark Petition. Although the chances of that might be narrow. And I may be mistaken, but I think these Storm decks have a slightly or maybe significantly lower volume of 1-drops than traditional Storm decks used to have in the past. I think I would do the Spirit and the Chalice at 0.
Yeah, and one of the reasons I actually really like that is part of the ones that you used to want to shut down are cards that Spirit of the Labyrinth that shuts down already.
Yeah. So a lot of bases are covered. Although Steve has a Vampiric Tutor.
Oh, Vamp is not bad. Steve has... He's a lot of mana, but it's not fast mana. He has 3 lands in his hand. So he can get pretty close to setting up a Dark Petition here. At some point, Steve might have to fire off Probe, even though it doesn't draw a card off the Spirit, just to get a spell in his graveyard for Spell Mastery.
Right. I wonder what he'll Vampiric Tutor for. I guess not Tinker, because of the Chalice.
Probably not Ancestral Recall either.
No. Luis, do you know what that strange-looking creature in Kai's hand is?
I do. It's an Eldrazi Mimic. It's a 2/1, and whenever you play an Eldrazi, it turns into that, or you may turn into that Eldrazi's Power and Toughness. So
I didn't know that from the art. I haven't played much Modern, so I'm sure that that's a scourge to people that have been playing Modern. Even
it was for a little while. Then all the then Ayavugan got banned, and then it became a little less good.
I know that. I have a casual, very surface level knowledge of other formats. I like Vintage.
I would not have guessed. So this puts Kai 1 land away. Hopefully not a 0-drop, because then he couldn't cast it. But 1 land away from casting a Reality Smasher and just clocking Steve for 13. So Steve's actually just dead to a land if he doesn't do something this turn, just about, as long as if he pays life for anything else.
What are you Vampiric Tutor for?
I mean, you could get Dark Ritual, and then you'd have Spell Mastery off the Probe if you want. But then what can you can't Dark Petition for like Necro. Man, Spirit of the Labyrinth does put a beating on Steve. Like he can't tutor for Ancestral. Cards like Time Twister certainly don't work.
There's not going to be much he can do, because if you were to Dark Ritual and play the Ancient Tomb, and probe for Spell Mastery but not draw a card, then under ordinary circumstances, you might be able to set something up with Vampiric Tutor, Gitaxian, and Probe. Under this circumstance, meaning Vampiric and Probe out of the graveyard, but because he can't draw more than 1 card per turn, which is like a living hell. Yes, just Steve is in a tough spot. If he had a Soul Ring, Tinker would be nice.
Oh, Massacre. Well, there we go. So you can play it for free because Kai made the unfortunate mistake of having Plains in his deck, though I guess that is the land the deck wants to play. And then, yeah Steve's going to want to probe here, presumably. And Steve still is actually in trouble to Kai drawing a land, because Reality Smasher is still a 2-turn clock, or at least not quite 2 turns, but it turns off Ancient Tomb, which is very close to it, because Steve's Moxes are still stranded. But Steve has a lot more outs here.
Massacre was nice.
The second Massacre a little less impressive. So Kai's hoping to draw either a creature or a land, not a 0-drop. Oh. Trinosphere's a thing.
Yes, it is. Hmm.
So now if Steve wants to play any card, he has to take 2 damage off his Ancient Tomb. And if he wants to cast the Probe here, he might as well pay the blue. And then
Right.
he ends up seeing the Reality Smasher now freshly at 10 life. It's going to be a little awkward.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say Trinisphere was reasonably better than just drawing a land, because now Steve has an additional barrier that he has to overcome before he can try to win this game.
Correct. Now, if Kai draws several zero casting cost artifacts in a row, that would be karmic. Brainstorm.
Canonist's not doing as much as it would in other situations because that Trinisphere is kind of already acting as a pseudo Canonist.
And it's dead, or Steven decides to kill it.
Yeah, Steven can play Massacre, but again, Trinisphere rears its ugly head.
Exactly.
And Massacre now costs 3. Blightsteel Colossus also not the optimal draw. It basically never is, unless you're talking about last game, which I guess it got hard cast.
Mm-hmm.
So Steve still knows that there's a Reality Smasher lurking there. Probably just have to cast Massacre here, even though it's just kind of unpleasant. But I guess Massacres aren't really supposed to be pleasant.
I think he wants to find Hurkyl's Recall now, because if he could find a way to Hurkyl Kai on Kai's turn, he can probably get a lot done.
Steve is a little short there, because, yeah, he needs to Hurkyl's end of turn. He doesn't have enough... he doesn't have enough blue mana to do anything, or mana total to do anything on his turn.
I may be wrong, but I think I would brainstorm here and plan to Massacre maybe next turn in case Kai draws a Thalia, because all that would have to happen is Kai draws a Thalia, and then everything gets a lot worse. Even after if he were to find the Hurkyls, because Thalia can't be Hurkyl.
I think Steve's just on the plan of Kai not ever casting this Reality Smasher, because if Kai can cast Reality Smasher, then Steve's in a ton of trouble. Well, it wasn't a Reality Smasher, but Thought-Knot Seer is actually probably better, because this way Kai gets to disrupt Steve for a turn, take Brainstorm presumably, and then, or he could actually take Dark Petition. It's not unreasonable. Yeah, actually, Dark Petition might be a better card to take.
Not that Dark Petition would do all that much.
Well, the difference is if you take Dark Petition, you know if Steve casts Brainstorm, he's just dead because of Trinisphere. He can never cast another thing. Whereas if you take Brainstorm and Steve top decks a land, you might end up in a situation where he goes Dark Petition for a 3-mana good spell.
Well, so if Kai draws a land, it's over. If he doesn't, and Steve somehow brainstorms into...
I'm having a difficulty figuring out what exactly Steve could brainstorm into. This Chalice on Zero is looking pretty good, though.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think if he brainstormed into Hurkyl's Recall, Black Lotus, and something else, he might be able to do stuff.
Look at how unlucky Kai is. Instead of drawing lands, he keeps drawing more and more lock pieces. So at this point, Steve can't even tap Ancient Tomb because now he's at 2. And then the Thorn is just going to put the final nail in the coffin. Not that Kai really needed it. I think he would have been fine without it. Steve's best line here might be to untap and just immediately tap Ancient Tomb.
Well, if he draws Hurkyl's Recall right now, no.
Hercule's Recall, he'd be able to cast, and then he'd be able to go Lotus Petal Ancestral, but it would be a stretch from there. Oh, there was the Hercules.
There's the Hercules. Well, and Kai Buddha takes it with the white Eldrazi deck.
Eldrazi 2-0 so far in some matches that didn't seem particularly close. Or sorry, 1-1. It lost to Dredge. That's the other match. Though that one also didn't seem that close. So
Thanks.
All right, who do you have coming up next? We've got Randy against Paul Rietzel.
Oh, it should be an interesting match.
Are we going to end up in a situation where Paul Rietzel is not the one playing the mono white deck? Because technically Kai and Rich are both playing mono white, right? Like they're playing white Eldrazi, so it would be funny if Rietzel was not the one playing that.
You're really channeling that Randy is going to play this Eldrazi deck. I don't know if you know something, but
I don't know anything because he was my opponent, so certainly I don't have any information there. My guess is that he's playing it. I'm not saying that I think he's like 80% to play it, but I think he's more likely to play that than any other individual deck.
Fair.
So
I don't know what Paul is going to play. I would say there's a 40% chance that it would be the White Hate Bears thing, but it also could be something on the same vector that restricts your ability to cast spells. A shop deck, the Eldrazi deck. He might try something more orthodox for Vintage. Not that Hate Bears aren't orthodox, but he might say people are going to expect me to play this Hate Bear deck, so I'm going to play Oath of Druids and catch them off guard. I really don't know.
The problem with that is the Eldrazi deck has main deck Containment Priest and Eldrazi Displacer. I'm like skeptical that it even gets destroyed by Oath. The Eldrazi deck just seems sick.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that he would play Oath of Druids specifically to stop Eldrazi, but just to thwart expectations that he would be on another one of these White Hate Bear.
That's fair. Well, I'm very curious what Randy is going to be playing, since I do face him with this current set of decks.
And I play Paul.
There we go.